Hello, and welcome to the Steve and Mark Discuss podcast. Today, Steve is going to mention a subject to me, describe what he feels about things, and I will respond. So, over to Steve.
Hi, people. Well, this is normally I get an article from the news, and we sort of open it up like a can of worms and look what's inside the article. This time, I'm talking about headlines and how the media. It's just getting worse. There's very little journalism that's going on in the media, and this has been highlighted quite clearly this last couple of days. We had um, the supposed bombing of a hospital in as it's in the mainstream media now. You know, it's got this bombing of this hospital in Gaza, where supposedly when the reports came out, there were 500 people who were killed, and the media took the story, didn't have any of the information, but took the notion of the story and ran with it. And this got a repercussion around the world because there were many Muslim people around the world who demonstrated over the very fact that they thought, the fact that this hospital had been destroyed and that 500 people had been killed in this hospital. It turns out that the story may not be quite like what was being first reported. One of the big disappointments for me was just, the journalist from the BBC who said, you know, that the Muslims have said that this hospital had been destroyed, that he got in contact with Israel, the armed forces in Israel, for their comments, and they said that they were initially they were going to start to investigate. They didn't give it. They didn't give any. They didn't give any reply, immediate reply. So up to that point, that was news. One side said this side, one side said this thing, the other side said no comment. We're going to investigate. That if he left it at that, that would be great, you know, because he just reported what he heard and what he saw, what he heard. But he went on to say, but it's difficult to imagine that this was anything else than a bomb from an aeroplane that dropped on the hospital. And that became an opinion piece. It stopped being a journalistic piece, it became an opinion piece. And unfortunately, the vast majority of news reports are becoming too opinionated rather than factual. The original Western news agency, if you like, that released the information about the 500 killed and all this, was Reuters, where, you know, Reuters is a news agency, and they sort of, once they get the information, they spread it around to all the other news outlets. So they'll send it to the Daily Mail, they'll send it to the Times, You know, normally at the end of the article, you'll see Reuters at the bottom.
Mm.
But the thing is that Reuters, I don't know if you remember, but some time ago, a couple of months ago, we did a podcast about Reuters and their what they're doing in Ukraine. And one of their journalists, a Reuters journalist, an Italian guy, he was sacked from Reuters because he was peddling a lot of lies. And the thing is that when you're a news organization, if you can't just give out the facts and you're giving out a set of lies or inaccurate information, to put it mildly, what happened? And you're one of those types of and you're one of those types of news outlets where you send your news to other outlets. They're just going to mirror what you're. They're just going to say what you've told them. You know, they'll put their style, the journalistic style, to the information that you're sending them. So once again, it was down to the independent journalists who were actually on the ground to say that, the hospital wasn't hit. There aren't 500 people uh, who have died. There was an explosion in the car park, and which didn't do a lot of damage. Didn't do a lot of damage to the ground in the car park, although it did damage a lot of cars and burnt a lot of cars. And who was the first one to really offer that information to the West was Alex Jones, who 10 years ago people were saying he was a madman, and now all of a sudden he's being highly respected, Alex Jones, because he a lot of what he said with his independent news channel uh, has come to pass, and it appears that his version of what happened at the hospital is more accurate, simply because the side of Hamas or the side of the people in Gaza are not saying that didn't happen. It's not what they are saying, it's what they are not saying.
Mm.
So, we have to look at all sides of when we look at the news, people. Yesterday there was an invasion of Capitol Hill again, a little bit like January 6th, and that's because a, a, a representative who was from that squad, which is an extreme left, Tlaib, her name is.
Mm.
She was crying yesterday, even though all this information about the car park and wasn't a hospital, it was a car. She was crying, giving a speech to the people before they invaded the capital. And these are the repercussions of. Well, it tells me that these are the repercussions of bad information. And secondly, what politicians, the top politicians of the country, are relying on to get their information. Because, I think they say the Washington Post, which is a very political newspaper.
Mm.
Washington, if they get their information from the Washington Post, of course it's going to be anti-Israeli and anti-right wing. Just one other thing about this invasion of the Capitol Hill, just to complicate things even more, is that the people who went to invade Capitol Hill yesterday were all Jewish people, apparently. And they are anti-Zionist Jews. So, they're against Israel, but they're for being a Jew. Logical, that's their religion. But they're against what Israel is doing, having these fights all the time. That's just, just put it like that. These squabbles that they have
Yeah.
between Israel and the Muslim world. Let's just say leave it like that. So that's what I've got for this conversation.
Right.
Let's
Okay. Right.
Let's see how it takes us.
Okay. Well, when it comes to media, I mean, things have changed. Yeah, the journalists are not, as we always regarded journalists, the people presenting the news don't always do that. The problem is, yes, they do give opinions. Maybe this has always happened in a more subtle way. These are people on the ground, or meant to be, observing, as you say, getting the full size of all the facts. The problem is, and we know this as podcasters, it's making the content exciting now, because we've got to fill so many, they've got to fill 24-hour news channels as well. Don't forget now. And we're not just talking about news coming on at 6 o'clock, at 10 o'clock at night, a bit in the morning. You've got 3-hour news programs running in the morning. They've got to fill things. Yeah, they do forget that they just need to report the facts. Now, there's also a scramble to get, if you like, the exclusive take on things first. And there is a joke now in the US. Yeah, the first for the news at 6 o'clock, retraction at 10 o'clock. This is what's happening as well. The scoop, getting in there, caught, dramatic. Hospital hit. Well, okay, the hospital is, in, to all intents and purposes, a war zone. Is going to be hit by occasion. There's a chance that any building there, whatever they are, is going to be hit by something. Yes, we all know it turns out it was a homemade rocket, possibly. You and I had this discussion yesterday. You texted me, have you seen the news? Well, I hadn't. I had a quick look at it, and I thought, well, there's something strange here. I've read a lot about military, and I've spoken to different people. Israel do not make, I won't say they don't make mistakes. It's a war zone, yeah. They are actually very, very good at doing what they do. And they're not going to tell you what they do or how they do it. They are trying to avoid civilian casualties. I mean, it's bad PR for them if they do, for the start. And I don't think, and don't forget, if they start killing too many innocent people, they will lose the support of their own people in Israel. Forget the horrific scenes we saw live streamed, again, which became a sensational news story in itself, people being killed. Again, there were some people who are saying, you know, this was AI generated. You can still tell a little bit if something's AI generated. Yeah. Again, that became the news story. It's all fake and all that, and it's proved otherwise. Yeah. And I think I did say that I was watching a clip of a journalist on a main outlet from the UK. And I think I commented to you when I was watching it, well, she's a bit too emotional to actually be doing any reporting. At first, I thought she was somebody they just picked up off the street. I'm afraid journalists do have to learn to be cold, almost inhuman, non-partisan in delivering us things. As exciting as it may be, oh, look at this, look at this. We need people like you and me are actually quite boring and pragmatic. You know, podcasters saying boring, we are. That's our style when we're talking to each other. Yeah, because I said to you, hang on, there's something that doesn't add up here. And I think you are testing me to see what my opinion was.
No, I was. Yeah. I was. It's just that, you know, if it was to be a little rocket,
yeah,
then using the information that we received,
yeah,
it was strange to me that it would be a little rocket, because if 500 people had died, blah blah blah,
yeah,
it could only have been something more powerful.
Yeah, I mean,
it turns out it was only a little rocket, and it only touched the car park.
Yeah, well, I mean, this rocket was destined for a populated area in Israel, where it probably would have done far more damage to somewhere. I mean, it's indiscriminate war. I mean, I was doing a lesson this week, funny enough, about.
It was fibbing, Mark. It was downright lying.
Well, it is.
Because it was downright lying. I remember. I'm sure you remember. I think it was in Syria.
Yeah.
Where they did the chemical babies.
Oh yeah.
Bombed in the hospital with the chemicals. It was all fake.
Well, yeah,
It was all fake, you know.
it. I mean, whatever we look at it, terrorists are masters, and let's call Hamas what they are. They're terrorists. I'm not afraid
Yeah,
to do that.
yeah,
Whatever I may feel sometimes, I support Israel being existing. I don't always agree with the way that maybe the Israelis deal with situations in Palestine, given that
yeah,
Palestine is the Gaza is effectively a self-ruling place anyway.
yeah.
Um, it's Hamas who have been running it for since 2006 or 2007, from what I understand. Again, it's a very complex situation. Um, I mean, yeah, if we're actually to be believed, um, the they've been using the pipes for the water. So they've been saying no water supplied. They're using water pipes to make these bombs or these rockets that have been launched. So yeah, um, yeah, the struggle's been going on for 5,000 years or so. I mean, I've got a book next to me about the history of the region, and written in the 80s. So not amongst the present issues. Yeah, an archaeology book, not something that's directly to do with news or any agenda. Yeah, this is what we dug out of the ground. This is what we understand. Um, yeah, it is a very, very complex situation. Both you and I are always very, very sorry to see anyone innocent on either side, or even soldiers, remembering that these people have families as well.
Sure.
Um, the Israeli soldiers are not fanatics. They don't want to kill anyone if they can avoid it. Soldiers will tell you that. They want to avoid killing certainly innocent civilians. If somebody's coming at them with a gun or a weapon, that's a slightly different thing. Um, it is then the Israelis are trying not to be indiscriminate. Hamas are indiscriminate killers. I'm afraid nobody wants to say that on mainstream news. And okay, it's probably is part of the balance. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, is what we heard in the 70s and the 80s. Yeah. So yeah, we have to be balanced. Um, Israel is fighting for its survival now. That is obvious. Yeah, I'm going to use it on. And
Well,
that,
it's funny to say that uh, the the news coming out of Global TV Global
mm,
was saying that they got their information from TV Lebanon,
yeah, oh, yeah,
and saying that the Israel is attacking Lebanon. So I went
yeah,
I went diving into the story
yeah,
as I do,
yeah,
and it turns out that actually the Hezbollah
mm,
and Israel are squabbling amongst themselves, but just along the border,
cool,
just
yeah,
along the border, and
yeah,
apparently they've been doing it for a few days already,
yeah.
you
Well,
know.
they're
They've
different
just been
ideologies as well. Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure they've got slingshots and they're just throwing stones at each other, you know. But it certainly isn't being attacked. Uh, the whole place is being attacked by Israel.
Well, it's quite
Not really.
interesting because the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, actually have a YouTube channel, and I'm not saying they're going to tell you everything. It's worth
No.
checking out. When you see a new story break, they give you some technical details and why and what's going on. I won't say they're not going to broadcast everything. They're certainly not going to give you battle plans. Um, it makes for an interesting viewing. It makes you think. I'm not saying, yeah, they're, and it's like I say, if something goes down, if you check that out first, and they will say we are investigating, because the one thing they do not want to do is give out false information, because that's not a good look for them amongst their own people, amongst the Jewish population in Israel, if not the world. Yeah, which brings me on to what's happening in the US when you're talking about Jewish people not being Zionists. Um, People are equating supporting Hamas with supporting the Palestinian cause. Okay, the two things are separate. Hamas are a power hungry, ideologically driven terrorist organization. Um, the Palestinian people have not had it easy, admittedly, who has in the region. And I'm not suggesting that there hasn't been wrongdoing from other people with them. You have to remember the Palestinians are getting a raw deal from other Islamic people as well. They're not getting support from others, if we believe the news, yeah, in the region as well. They are seen as a bit of a nomadic type people, given that what is a Palestinian? It's something that appeared in the 1970s, effectively, a group of people. Israel itself, and this is what's forgotten, actually has about 1 million, what was it, something about 20% of its population are non-Jewish. And that does include, or a large amount are Arab. Quite happily serving in the military and everything else there.
Yeah, no.
So when we start
people,
to, yeah.
If you look on the ground, apart from the security points, Israel and Palestine, the people move freely between the two states, if you like to call them states.
Well, the
Palestinians work in Israel, Israelis work in Palestine.
Exactly.
And everybody's just trying to work, like you said, sometimes Israel is going to do naughty things like take down a few houses and so they can make their space a little bit wider. But then that's up to Palestine and Israel. Normally these sort of things are negotiated, by the way. It's not like, it's not like all of a sudden Israel comes up with 5-10 bulldozers to build up. Normally, there's a negotiation beforehand. It's the people. It's the people that revolt, of course, because they're going to lose their home. However, when the Israeli Prime Minister says to the Palestinian guy who's in charge, take this $1 million here and put it in your bank account to keep it safe. He's going to say 10 houses for sure, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if that's happening, but I mean, there's a lot of money flying into the region.
It is, I'm sure it is.
I did hear somebody say the amount of money that's gone into the Gaza Strip. It should be Monaco, really. I don't know. I mean, I've not looked at the figures. That's more your department, Steve. But